Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each week I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is a show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. This week I speak with Jane Sunley, best-selling author and CEO of people engagement specialists Purple Cubed. We cover a wide range of topics in this episode, from looking at where you are currently in your career journey, the importance of your values and why you need to be spending some time thinking about them, why and how you should go about getting a career mentor, through to top tips to make your application stand out. No matter where you are currently in your job search, this is an episode you won't want to miss. As always, links to all we discuss and a full transcript are available in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/purple. But let's not waste any more time and crack straight on with episode 25. A very warm welcome today to Jane Sunley, best-selling author of Purple Your People and It's Never Okay to Kiss the Interviewer, and also founder and CEO of people engagement specialist Purple Cubed. Jane, a very warm welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, James. It's very lovely to be here.
So before we dive into the episode today, would you like to tell us a little bit more about what it is you do at Purple Cubed and how you became an author and CEO?
Yeah. So you know how companies tend to really complicate all of their HR and people, and it's just not as simple as it could be. Well, what our job is to simplify all of that, make sure it's all joined up, and then make sure that the things that HR and people do will impact the bottom line. So instead of having kind of, people always talk about HR like tissues and issues and cabinets full of policies and all of that, this is about business savvy, very practical tools that will enable companies to be a better place to work and have happy employees, which therefore will be more engaged and therefore will be more productive. So we've got software business and a kind of consultancy which we call enabling, which is how we help people to deliver the things that we suggest they do.
Wow, excellent. I like the tissues and issues. I've not heard that one before.
Sometimes people say HR's human remains, don't they? We won't be that rude.
And today we're going to go into detail for your great, I love the title for the book, It's Never Okay to Kiss the Interviewer and Other Secrets to Surviving, Thriving and High-Fiving at Work.
Yeah.
Today we're going to go into more detail for some of the topics from it. But before we start, what was the motivation, Jane, for writing the book?
Well, I wrote my first book that was a very comprehensive yet easy-to-use guide to being a great place to work. And having done that, and the book did quite well and sold quite well, and lots of people called it their HR Bible and things, I thought I need to do the other side of the coin now and write a book for people to be successful and happy at work, because if you put the two together, then life should be marvellous, shouldn't it? So that was my attempt, if you like, to just make people think about what would actually make them happy, engaged, etc. at work, rather than doing perhaps, not really thinking it through and just doing what they thought everybody else thinks they should do, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And from lots of people I coach, overriding feeling is definitely going with the flow and just
Absolutely.
Rather than proactively planning their career, it's just things that come along, just attached to them.
And I'll tell you what sparked this book up. The title is what sparked it off, really, because I've been thinking, I really ought to do that. And I was giving a lecture to some master's degree students in Oxford, and at the Q&A bit at the end, somebody put his hand up and said, if the interviewer's a lady, is it okay if I give her a kiss? And of course I said, absolutely not, under no circumstances, and just thought, goodness, I think I need to tell people the basics here. So that's what kick-started it, and that's what made me sit down the next day and write it.
Would have been interesting if someone had tried to give the interviewer a kiss when I'd been on the panel recruiting. Would have.
Well, exactly, but what a weird question to ask.
So you talk at the beginning of the book about the career cycle and deciding where you are and what's next.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain, what is the career cycle and how listeners can understand where they are on it?
Yes, I will. I wrote this book for anybody at any age, but it has had a great graduate uptake, obviously, because I guess finding a job is probably more pertinent to them than anybody. But I think your career starts as early as when you're at school and even before, when your mum says, what do you want to be? And you say, oh, I'm going to be a fireman or whatever. You're not going to start really seriously thinking about a career. But between that age and perhaps going to university, there are a whole lot of years where you might want to start forming thoughts. And I think it's really important to observe those thoughts. So you might say, well, I'm in education at the moment. I'm nowhere near actually doing my career, but let me start thinking about what I really want to do. And what tends to happen traditionally is that everybody goes, oh, I think you should do this, or why don't you do that? Careers teachers, parents, friends, everybody you know has always got a suggestion for you. So I think it's really important to say, am I in those bits when I'm just forming my thoughts? Am I in a part where I'm very serious and I know what I want to do, so I'm going to pick my courses or my course of study accordingly? Or am I in a job but happy, not happy? Am I in a role I want to be in? Am I in the environment I want to be in? So in the book, there's a kind of bit of a diagram over 2 pages where it just makes you think about where am I now, and then let's look at the next stages, where do I want to be? Because, as with anything, if you know where you are now and where you want to get to, then you can start filling the gap in the middle.
I loved in the book, and I wasn't aware of this, the word career comes from the French word carrière,
yes,
meaning road.
Yes. So you're on a road, and people, I called it the superhighway in the book because it's more than a road, but, you are on a road, and if you think about it as a journey, you wouldn't kind of necessarily do the whole journey in one lot. You wouldn't set out on a journey if you didn't know where you were going, probably. Maybe if you're backpacking, think you'll go as life takes you. But, so I think it's just important to think about it as a road, really.
And you talk about the importance of starting with the end result in mind.
Yeah.
What questions can graduates be asking themselves to think about that end point?
Well, I think I would say, what do I like doing? What do I enjoy? What makes me happy? Because, if you're 20, I don't want to depress everybody, but you may have 50 years of work ahead of you.
That is depressing.
Therefore, you need to be happy for most of that time, if not all of it. And, I know people who have been working for 40 years and aren't happy at all. And that's just ridiculous. So I'm on this mission to say people are allowed to be happy at work. People constantly say to me, oh, you're not supposed to be happy at work. Of course you are. So start with the end in mind. It's not about having a very fixed view about what the actual job is or what the actual company is. It's about saying what sort of environment or what sort of role would allow me to use my strengths, the things that make me happy, the things that interest me. And I think Generation Y and Z certainly will be more and more aware of the fact that they want to be happy and they want to do things they enjoy. They're not going to be wage slaves in inverted commas. They're going to be fulfilled people who are making a great contribution. So just think about the sort of things, and then you can start working out where you want to be eventually and how you're going to get there.
And you also talk about how too often people are moving away from something as opposed to moving towards something else. And looking back at my early career moves, it was, it was true. It was, well, I don't really like that, so I'll, try not to do much of that. And it was moving away as opposed to moving forward.
Yeah, we get applicants at work sometimes, and we say, why do you want to come and work here? And they say, because I hate where I am now, or I can't stand my boss. And that's not a reason to go towards something. I want people to say, I want to come here because you're a great place to work, or I want to come here because you've got great opportunities for developers, or whatever it happens to be. And I think if you're trying to get away from something, you need to sit and think really, really hard about what it is you want instead, because otherwise you're going to have a whole lifetime of unhappiness evading things and never really finding the thing that makes you happy. And that just needs a bit of thinking, really. Everybody owes it to themselves to give themselves some time just to consider what that might be instead of, rushing into it or, as we say, moving away from all the time.
And linked then to the happiness and being happy at work, how important then do you think values are in people's personal values in terms of the work that they should be doing?
2 things, I think. First of all, it's important to know what your own values are. And people go, well, what does that mean? Your values are the things that are important to you in life, at work, and so on and so forth. So, for instance, it might be freedom, it might be having fun at work, it might be money, it might be having structure. So, as a simple example, if you want really good structure, don't go and work in a small entrepreneurial business where everybody mucks in and it's, quite unstructured. And ditto, if you want freedom, don't go and work for a very, very structured environment because you're not going to be happy. And on my website, janesunley.com, there's a free tool, which we will never hassle you or contact you or anything. It's just there to make the world a better place, really. But there's a free values tool that you can go and prioritise your values. It takes about 10 minutes or so. And I think once you know what your own values and what's important to you are, then you can start to look for an environment or a company that aligns with your values. And it's almost like when you go for an interview, you're going to be interviewing them in a way as much as they're interviewing you. And those are the kind of things you want to find out. Will I be able to fulfill my own values within this organisation? So important. And I will just mention that when I do coaching, and I do a manual version of what I used to before we had it online, of eliciting people's values, the things that they think of last, usually when we put them into priority order, ended up being on the top of the list. So it's not always in the front of your mind, the things that really, really matter, and that's why you need to sit and give it some thought.
That's interesting. And the links to the value checker will be on the show notes, so I'll link to them. Great. And did it myself this morning, and it was interesting. I talked with James before we started recording. One of the options that was money or fun, and I was looking at the screen thinking, what am I more interested in? And it's it's difficult decisions like that, because if you go for a job which might be the cool and great fun, but if you're very low paid or not getting paid, the two values might be then in competition. Yeah. Can be difficult.
But of course, these things will evolve over time. I mean, you should probably do it once a year, really, because it might be that right now you're living at home with your parents, so the money's less important, so you go for the fun. But it might be in a few years' time you want to move out, or you, find a partner, or you have a baby or whatever, and then money becomes more important. So I think it's important to keep reviewing this because it changes.
So once people have got their values and they know they're prioritised and they've got an idea of what their core values are, how then should they begin to start using them in their job search?
Well, I think some people have a bit of an idea of what they want to know, but I know an awful lot of people that have got what they want to do. An awful lot of people have no idea about what they want to do. So in that case, that's about saying, okay, there are my values. Now let me think about what I'm good at and what strengths I've got and what experience I've got and what I can do with it. And I wouldn't get too hung up on the actual job title, but then if you go and start to research companies, you should be able to see from their websites and Google searching them and all the rest of it what their values are. You'll be able to see from the tone. Some of them, great, put them on the website, fantastic, big tick. You should probably give priority to those companies who have defined their values and are out there saying, this is what we're about, this is what we stand for. Because it's quite easy then to say, yeah, I would really fit in there, or do you know what, I'm not interested in a company like that. So if you can find a company that's quite transparent, then that really helps. And if not, as I say, just look for the signs. If you go on a website and it looks very, very corporate and all the rest of it, if those sort of values are in your value set, then great, go and work in the corporate environment. If it's very cool and fun and a bit laid back and a bit funky and all the rest of it, then maybe that fits your value set. So it's very important to find an environment in which you can thrive and survive, because you might be the best, most talented employee in the world, but if you're in the wrong environment, you're going to bomb, and that happens all the time. And then people lose confidence and it ruins their careers. So think about environment.
You mentioned in the book about how you have a values mentor at work. What does he do?
We do. We've got 8 values at work, which is quite a lot really, but it's important to us that we are very clear about what we are. So we've got an overall values mentor who's somebody who from the very first day, the only person I've ever interviewed who, when I said to him in the interview, what do you know about our values, he rolled them all out and told me exactly what they were. And I said, if you come and work here, you should be our values mentor. So he's kind of the overall one, and then various different people in the company are responsible for keeping the values alive. So one of ours is about achievement, for instance. So we measure outputs rather than inputs. So we don't go, what are you doing today? It's more about what did you achieve today. So the values mentor for achievement, all of the conversations will be about how's that going to help us towards the goal, how's that going to help us achieve. And we've got lots of fun. One of our values is fun. We've got lots of mentors for that, as you can imagine. But it's just, I want people in my business, there's only 25 of us, but we want our people to keep that alive and to make sure that anybody that comes in is very immersed in our values. And when we interview them, we look them in the eye and say, look, these are our values. Can you 100% commit to supporting those values? Because if you can't, don't come here. And it's as kind of simple as that, really.
It's a great example of someone doing the homework and doing the research and proper research into a company before the interview and it paying off.
I was so impressed, honestly. I'd have given that guy a job even if he probably didn't have any skills at all, because he cares enough to go and learn what they are and look at it. And, you know, I mean, that was years ago and he's still there now and he's done really well with us. So it just goes to show, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. So you talk in the book also about mentoring.
Yes.
And the importance of getting a mentor. Why is it mentor important to job seekers?
I think it's important because if you have someone who's in your corner, who's not your mum, maybe your mum might be your mentor, but I think it's useful to have somebody outside of the personal kind of arena and someone who's going to help you because they're a nice person and they want to give back, but that have got some relevant either experience or knowledge or can ask good questions. I think it just helps have a bit of a sounding board sometimes. And what, in my experience, tends to happen, because I mentor a lot of grads, post-grads, they ask about 10 people for their opinions and then get very confused because they get lots of conflicting information. And I think if you can get one person that you really trust to help you bounce things off, not to tell you what to do, to ask you the right questions and, you know, nurture around it, it helps. Because if you ask too many people, that's why so many people don't know what they want to do, because they ask 10 people and they get 10 different answers and then they just end up more confused than when they started, really. So I think mentoring helps to hone it down a bit. And there's a lot of people out there with really good knowledge. So you may as well suck it up, I think, and take it in and benefit from it.
Definitely. And how would you recommend people go about finding a mentor? I mean, you mentioned you've got 10.
Yeah, I think I'd start with, you know, who do you know and which people do the people you know, and who do you admire, and is there anybody that you think, wow, that's the career I'd like to have? And it's quite interesting that if you ask people, I find the more successful and further up the ladder they are, they'll either help you or they'll help you find someone. So I'll give you a real life example. My daughter is studying criminal psychology, and she wrote to a very eminent criminal psychologist in New Zealand and said, you know, if I do this, would you mind being a bit of a mentor? You know, you'd have to meet me, but if I could kind of email with you or WhatsApp with you or whatever. And this woman said, yeah, absolutely, I'm happy to do that. And when she asked her, I thought, oh, she'll never do it. And she did, because people want to give back and want to be helpful. So always ask, you know, aim high. If they say no, it doesn't matter. Just move on to somebody else. Or, as I say, they might know someone who can help you. So look at people you admire and go, well, how did you do it? And, okay, life's different, but it will give you some hints and tips at least.
If you don't ask, you don't get?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how does a mentor differ from a coach?
A coach is usually somebody who hasn't got the relevant experience in that, you know, if you want to go into banking, your mentor might have banking experience. Your coach may have no banking experience, but will just be very skilled in questioning, talking around goals, helping you to work out how you're going to get there. And coaches, in my experience, are usually paid for. So if you've got plenty of money and you want to invest in a coach, that's great. Mentors will usually do it for free. So I'd say, you know, always try for a mentor first, really. I think, you know, you might want to use a coach if there was some particular sticking issue that you wanted to get over, or you needed to deal with something that hadn't gone well or whatever. But I think I'd go for the mentoring option if possible, really. Maybe when you get into business and you're, you know, in a job, then you can come to people like me and you, James, and we'll coach them.
No, definitely. I'm always available.
Yeah.
Just get in touch.
Yeah.
So moving on to experience, I loved your comment in the book that you should view everything in the context of how could this be useful to me at work.
Yes.
So what would you suggest are the best ways people can go about finding experience and using it effectively?
I think it's important to find some sort of work experience, whatever it is. And there's a story in the book about somebody I know who, very, very bright, super bright maths graduate, took a job in the summer sticking labels on bottles, which was like the most boring job ever, and he thought it was dreadful when he first started. But actually the camaraderie of the team, who were all sticking the labels on the bottles all day, repetitively, hour in, hour out, really taught him loads about team dynamics, about motivation. You know, they used to have competitions who could stick the most labels on and get the least crooked ones, and who could do them the fastest, and just all of this kind of bantery, camaraderie stuff just taught him so much about how to deal with a fairly mundane task and not to feel demotivated. And it was like a massive learning thing. And when he first went there, he said, this will be no good whatsoever for my future career. But of course it is, because he learned all of those other bits. So don't think of the experience as the task. Think of the experience about all the things that are going on around you. And so you could, volunteer, go on work experience, join a football team. Any of those things where you're interacting with other people and working towards some sort of end result will be relevant to whatever your chosen career is if you tell it in the right way. So if sticking labels on bottles is not going to be helpful for a career in accounting, but you could say, well, I know a lot about team dynamics because, and if you illustrate how you can use your experience in the employer's context, that's a massively strong thing. So go and work in a burger bar and learn about customer service, about resilience, about time management, about delegation, all of those things, and then translate it into your chosen career.
Completely agree. There's always something you can get from each experience, whether sweeping the streets.
Absolutely, and it just shows that you're prepared to get up and do it, really. If people apply to me, however qualified they are, I need them to have done something and been out there and, just turned up and done it and been reliable and all of that.
Thinking more personally then about your company and when you're recruiting, what is it you look for in candidates and graduates that apply to you? How can people stand out?
Well, we have quite a specific way of recruiting in that we ask them to write us 10 bullet points about why they're the right person to work for us and a one-page CV. And I'll tell you now, over 90% of the people who apply do neither of those things. So they get rejected because if you can't follow an instruction, it tells me you don't really want to do it and you're just chucking out CVs, or you're not going to actually do as you're asked when you get there. And then the standout things for us are people who can write, so they can think cohesively. It's not about having to write in the job, it's just about how to think logically. We need people who've got a great attitude, who smile a lot, who look as if they want to be there. We're not terribly hung up on having millions of skills apart from, techs obviously have to be able to have technical skills, but we can teach most of it. It's more about having the right attitude and doing your homework and having thought about it before the exam, researched it a little bit, come with some suggestions. If you turn up and say, I could really help your business by doing X, Y, and Z, that's a massively strong thing. So don't just sit there and be passive. Make sure you've done a lot of proactive thinking before you get there.
So it's interesting you say that 90% of people just don't follow the instructions. So what do they send? 2-page CVs?
They send 10-page CVs and a massive long letter or a massive long email or whatever. And it's like, no, we don't want to read all that. We're not about all that. We're about simplifying. One of our values is make it simple. So we have to have people who can do that. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
No, definitely. And within the 10 bullets, are you open to anything, or people can be?
Yeah, people write them in purple sometimes because we're called purple cubed, and sometimes they're really long bullets. We like a short one, really. But some people are quite funny. It just says such a lot more about their personality than if they're writing you a standard, I would like to apply for this job. I am passionate and ambitious. I mean, everybody says that. Of course, you're expected to be passionate and ambitious. We want people who can stand out from the crowd by saying something different or even doing something different. We have had a video 10 points once before, which was kind of different. We didn't really get too excited about it, but it's more about the content than the delivery, really.
But you said as long as people are doing the homework and doing the research and putting some care and attention in, then that's
exactly.
The win.
Which is why it's never a good idea to send out 100 identical CVs to 100 jobs. You're better to do your research, find some places that you really want to work, and then put some energy and effort into impressing those few people than just chucking it out there, because you're not going to stand out if you send out standard stuff. You have to show that you've read up about it, that you've been on their website, that you've looked really into the job, and that you're explaining exactly why you want to work there in particular, why you want that job in particular. And if you don't do that, they're just going to chuck your CV in the bin. I mean, I've seen it so many times.
No, I completely agree, and it always makes me laugh in the paper when every so often when you see the picture of some sad-looking graduate, with I've applied for 200 jobs and had 200 rejections,
Exactly.
and you think, well, maybe instead of applying for 200, if you'd applied to 10 and done them properly.
And do it really well, exactly, and stand out from the crowd, yeah. Absolutely.
So time is running away from us, Jane. But before we go to the quickfire question round, just wanted to one final question. This time on positivity. So I love the comment in the book about the need to stay positive and to channel your inner cheerleaders. Could you explain what you meant by this?
Well, I think it can be very disheartening looking for a job. I know I've been there years ago, and rejection is never good. And so I think part of staying positive is to try and get some feedback on why they didn't want you in the first place. Not all people will do that, particularly big companies don't like to do it. Small companies normally will. But I think it's just about finding a way to go, I am going to get a job. I will get there eventually. And if they don't want me, then it wasn't right for me. I wasn't right for them, or they weren't right for me. So it's kind of about saying, instead of saying, oh, I didn't get that job, it's terrible. It's about going, well, do you know what? It's their loss. I'm going to go and move on to somewhere else. And you need to get some inner resilience for that. Otherwise, you get all the people around you going, oh, never mind. Oh, it just makes you feel worse. So you do have to kind of channel a bit of inner strength. And that's maybe where your mentor could help, or, a good friend who you can go out and have a laugh about it. Because as soon as you get down, it will show in your interview. I've interviewed people who've said, I've been out of work for 6 months now. And they're really down on their luck and all the rest of it, and they look so miserable, and that's not going to get you a job, unfortunately. You can't get a job out of sympathy, so you have to find some strength and be positive.
Very wise words there. So shifting gears now, moving on to the quickfire question round, Jane. What one book would you recommend to our listeners to read?
You might think this is a bit weird and a bit miserable, but going back to the positivity thing, I think if you can think there's always someone worse off than you, it helps you to get through these things. So there is this brilliant book by Lynn Smith called Forgotten Voices of the Holocaust, and it's stories of people who were interned in concentration camps, etc., and survived. And although you might think that's the most miserable book in the world, it's full of stories of courage and strength and resilience and hope and survival. And I always think, whenever anything awful happens to me, and it does in your career, occasionally things go wrong, and, you could really just give up and think, oh no, you just think, they were a billion times worse off than I will ever be, and those people came out of it and built fantastic lives and had children and careers and all the rest of it. So I would recommend that book for just putting in perspective that actually however bad things get, they're probably never going to get that bad.
That's a good idea. It's not one I've come across.
No,
so
is that a weird choice?
No, not at all. It's it's you said it's always good to have perspective of other people.
Yeah.
And puts things
it
makes things
stops
easier.
you saying poor me, I tell you.
And what one website would you recommend, Jane?
Well, I think the obvious one is you've got to all get on LinkedIn, really, because if you're not on LinkedIn, it's going to be so much more difficult for you to network. And if people are on there, they're on there because they're willing to be networked with. Obviously, I'd recommend my own website and my own book because, there's stuff there that really will help. So I guess, between my website and LinkedIn, you might be all right, really.
Yep, and I'll link to both in the show notes.
Okay.
And as you mentioned LinkedIn, we talked earlier about mentors. A great way to find yourself a mentor is to approach people on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, yeah.
And finally, Jane, what one tip can listeners implement today to help them in their job search?
My one tip is just to remember that you are allowed to be happy at work, and always remember that.
I think that's a brilliant point to end the interview on. As you said, 50 years is a long time to work, especially 5 days a week, long hours, so make sure you're somewhere where you're happy.
Absolutely.
Jane, what is the best way that people can get in touch with you in the work that you do?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Jane Sunley, and my website, janesunley.com, or via purplecube.com.
Jane, thank you very much for coming on the Graduate Job Podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
My thanks again to Jane. She made a load of great points there which are well worth repeating. The key one for me, and worryingly, it's one that people often forget, is that as Jane said, it's okay to be happy at work. And that's a biggie, so let me say it again. It's okay to be happy at work. This isn't some ethereal pipe dream. It should be the norm. Work is where you spend the majority of your life, and where you'll be doing it for the next 50 years. Just think you'll be spending more time a day with the person you're sat next to at work than with your significant other. So make sure you aren't going to be looking back with regrets in future years. As part of this, think about your skills, strengths and values, and think about the type of roles in which you're going to make you fulfilled. Check out the book Strengths Finder 2.0, which I mentioned in episode 14, and also do use Jane's values tool on her website. You can check out the links to it in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/purple. The second key takeaway for me is on mentoring. Mentors are brilliant allies to have in your corner, to give you advice, be a sounding board, and to help with networking in your chosen industry. Often the only thing standing between you and your mentor is the fact you haven't asked them. Now don't be scared to reach out and ask. As Jane said, aim high. Go for the people at the top. Successful people love sharing advice on how they got to where they are now. Use LinkedIn as a tool to find them, and then use Twitter as one to message them. Don't be scared. Give it a go. If they say no, that they can't do it, it doesn't matter. Use John Lee's top tip from episode 16 and keep the conversation going. Ask them if they can think of anyone else who might be able to help. And you never know where they might recommend. Finally, I always love hearing from business owners about how they recruit, and Jane had 2 nuggets. The first was follow the brief. Now this is a really simple one. If they ask for a 1-page CV and 10 bullet points, or a 2-page CV and a covering letter, or a video, whatever it is, make sure that's what you give them. It's often a simple test, just to root out those who can't follow simple instructions. And that 90% of people who apply to Jane don't follow them is staggering. Make sure you're not one of them. Secondly, when you apply to any company, do your research thoroughly. Know about its values, goals, profits if they're available, new products, etc. This is your chance to stand out, just as the employee who wowed Jane by knowing all about her company's values did. So there you go, episode 25 with Jane Sunley wrapped. If you've enjoyed it, do get in touch with us on Twitter at GradJobPodcast or with Jane at Jane Sunley. Check out the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/purple. And if you've enjoyed the show, do leave a review on iTunes, just like a listener over in the States, VP Carter did, saying, love the variety of subjects covered in various interviews. A great resource for anyone looking for tips while starting or rebooting their careers. 5 stars. Thank you very much, VP. The shows do take a lot of time to pull together, so it's always great when I do get feedback. So if you're finding them useful, please leave a review, and it'd be great to read them out on the future shows. So there you go. That was episode 25. But don't worry, 26 has already been recorded, and it's a cracker with Simon Reichwald from Bright Futures, the UK's largest career-focused student society, which will be with you in just 1 week. In the meantime, hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.